Aidan here for a special solo episode of the Deep Focus Show. Today I'm going to be going over my choices for the my top 10 favorite films of the 1930s. This decade is very significant to me. This is, to me, the first decade where I can watch a film on its own merits and enjoy it for what it is rather than put myself in the context of when it was made and what was going on at the time. This is kind of the first decade that offers, at least to a modern audience, kind of straight down the pipe entertainment, I feel like. Obviously, people can disagree with that, but that's where I'm approaching this from. So yeah, let's get into it. My number 10 is The Wizard of Oz, classic film, 1939. Victor Fleming directed it. It's been absorbed into kind of the pantheon of popular culture in the Anglosphere, I think for a reason. It has so many classic moments, characters, sequences, that it's just become kind of a part of everyone's experience with popular culture. But as a film too, it's just a great movie. The music is very good. The cinematography, how lush and beautifully shot the Technicolor is for the Oz sequences, as well as the contrast with that black and white look for the scene shot or set in the real world. It's just absolutely stunning to look at, and it's a classic story that has become a part of broader culture for very understandable reasons. Moving on to number 9. This is another film that is largely, at this point, considered a classic. I think also for very good reasons. It is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And, this film at the time was dubbed Disney's folly. People said a theatrical animated feature would never work. It would never sell, and it was largely considered before it released that it would be a big disappointment. Of course, when it came out, it became one of the highest grossing films of all time, which it still is today. And it's absolutely has stood the test of time, in my opinion. I think the thing that is the most noteworthy about this one is the absolute amazing standard of the animation. It has this lush storybook fairy tale quality, which is perfect for the material. It looks so rich, so textured, and so dense that it has just this very antiquated but also beautiful look that I think is amazing. And it wouldn't be a classic if people didn't connect to it. And I think the Seven Dwarfs are a very fun part of the film too. They add that comedic element. They have music involved in the film too. It's just, it's a film that offers people a great experience of going to the movies, sitting down with the popcorn and watching something very entertaining and very well-rounded as a form of entertainment. So moving on, I have 2 international films on this list. The first one, my number 8, we're going to Russia for this one. It's a film directed by Sergei Eisenstein, Beijing Meadow. This, in contrast to the previous 2, doesn't quite work as entertainment in the same way. It's a very serious film, very somber and elegiac, but that works, I think, for the material. This film was famously censored by the Soviet government because it was deemed anti-communist, so it doesn't exist in the director's original vision. But I still think it's absolutely the use of black and white. It looks very good. It looks stunning at points. And the characters, they kind of act as archetypes more so, which I think works for this material. It's telling a simple, more universal story, and of kind of betrayal, family, that kind of thing. And I think it works to have characters that are simpler in that case. But yeah, my number 8, I think it's a very well executed, very good film. My number 7 is the other international film that I've chosen. This one is from Ireland. It's called Man of Iran, and it's a very this has the best cinematography of all 10 on this list for me. It's a docudrama, has elements of documentary and realism, but also has elements of fiction and narrative to it. I think it blends those in a very admirable way. I think the way it frames and shoots nature is extremely compelling. It looks still very strong, a distinction it shares with the director's later feature, Louisiana Story, which also just looks absolutely jaw-dropping. But this is a great film. The thing is, I don't think the story is as strong as my top 6, which is why it's all the way down here, even though I say it's probably shot the best, because it has a very simple story. It's engaging the audience on a level of visuals and of emotion rather than on a detailed plot. It's doing things differently than a traditional feature, so it's difficult to judge that against films that have that visual sense but also have a story to them. So it's a challenge rating it, but I've selected number 7 as where it goes. And moving on to number 6, it's a film largely considered a classic at this point as well, back to kind of a standard Hollywood, one of the films that many people have seen. For many it's a classic, the original Frankenstein. It's gothic, it's perfectly paced, perfectly acted. It has a great sense of style and of atmosphere. This is a perfect, Halloween movie. There's a reason these Universal horror movies are so associated with Halloween and with that time of the year, because they have the atmosphere and they have that crowd-pleasing appeal where they offer genuine horror and genuine thrills, but they do it in an entertaining way. They don't do it to disturb the audience. It's about entertainment first. I think that's what a great horror film should aspire to do. I think this does a great job. I think Boris Karloff is kind of the central part of it for me. He does an absolutely phenomenal performance as Frankenstein's monster. I think this part is deceptively difficult to do. You have to bring the right amount of humanity to the character, of his internal struggles and his kind of creation, with the sense that he is very much an outsider to humanity because of the circumstances of his creation. And I think Karloff does that very well. It's a delicate balancing act, performing a character like that. I think he nails it. I think this is one of his best performances. And yeah, it's a great film. My number 6. And then moving on to number 5, this is a film directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It's one of his early British films before he moved to the American studio system in the early 1940s. It's a film called The Lady Vanishes, and I really think it's just stellar. This is what movies are about. It's entertainment and has that intrigue and mystery and that's what, to me, great entertainment is it offers you the ability to become invested and sucked into a movie. It's a spy film, essentially, with elements of mystery, set on a train. And that's, it's a great setup. You immediately have the stakes are there, we have a matter of espionage. And then the train is a great setting because it's an enclosed space. It forces the characters to interact in ways that they wouldn't otherwise have to. So it's just a greatly plotted film. It's very entertaining. It's very intriguing. You don't really figure out what it's about until later on. It takes a while. It intrigues you. And it's very, very fun. And, you know, the central concept of you see a passenger on the train, you talk to them, and then later on you find that they've totally vanished and no one even remembers them or knows what you're talking about. It's such a great setup for a film, and there's a reason why so many films have done things similar with that kind of a setup, because it offers so much intrigue, and it pits your protagonist against what the other characters are saying, and it makes the audience both root for them to figure out what's going on and also be themselves intrigued and want to learn more. So yeah, my number 5. And moving on to 4, I think this is a truly epic, era-defining film. It's Howard Hawks' Scarface, the original, from 1932, starring Paul Mooney as Tony Camonte. And I think he is just amazing in this. This is an epic gangster film that is so massive and huge in its scope that it's just marvelous. It's just great. Boris Karloff is in this as well. He plays an adversary of Camonte's. George Raft is also in the film, and I really like his performance. And yeah, it's there's a lot of great things about this film. The use of symbolism and the metaphor of the world is yours sign, which is very much left up to the viewer's interpretation and very much an ambiguous symbol, and that reappears throughout the film. I really love that. I think a lot of early films don't have that great sense of symbolism, and I think this one really does. The choice to not have any non-diegetic music is also very compelling. You know, scores were not super common in the early days, but a lot of films did have them, and this one doesn't at all have any music, which I think gives it this urban grime and this sense of realism and hard, uncompromising storytelling that really works. I think Howard Hughes, the producer, had the right idea in kind of directing Howard Hawks, the director, to focus on the spectacle, the scope of a story like this. You know, it's kind of an inverted, twisted form of the American dream, so it should have that legendary, mythic tone and that quality to it. That's absolutely nailed here. I have not seen the remake from the 1980s, kind of the more famous version maybe, but I don't know if it's better. I don't know if it's worse, but I know that this is my number 4 and that I really enjoy it. Number 3 is another horror film. To me, this is the best example of this era of horror filmmaking. It's The Black Cat, starring Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. And this is just, oh my God, this is the kind of film that you are glad was made before they put the Hays Code. You're glad it's a pre-code film, because the ending is very sick, very twisted, and it's in what it shows, what it doesn't show. Not to get too deep into spoilers, but it's very ahead of its time in depicting such a kind of dark and twisted thing happening at the end. But also the performances are stellar, and the mystery, the intrigue it sets up is also amazing, with explaining why Lugosi bears such a profound grudge against Karloff's character. And then you discover more and more about what transpired between them in the past, and it just adds more and more to your understanding of why Lugosi feels this revenge. It's very compelling. It's the kind of film that I really enjoy watching. You know, it's some of these, the more I like a film, it's kind of like, it's more difficult to explain why, because there aren't, you know, small errors here or small things that I can point to. It's just overall the film is just a great experience, you know. So that's kind of a challenge, but I would just say watch the film. I would just say I think all of these are well worth a watch and kind of have taken their place, some of them more so than others. You know, some of them are established classics. Some of them aren't super common, but I think still have kind of acclaim. But I think all of them deserve that level of appreciation. And this is one I think deserves more than it gets. But yeah, and it also has a pretty short runtime, about 65 minutes, I want to say. So, and it very much makes the best use of that kind of film, where it has very tight plotting and doesn't have problems in the way it's told it. It delivers its story in a very in a way that's intriguing, but is also clear and focused, and it just delivers it in a very good way. Moving on to number 2, this is in many respects a tonal opposite from the previous one. That one was a dark, gothic horror film based on a work by Edgar Allan Poe. This one is a bright, technicolor fantasy epic. It's The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, starring Errol Flynn. It's amazing. This is why I love movies like this. It's just so grand. It has that element of whimsy, has that element of majesty, has that just it has that X factor of why people go and see movies. Errol Flynn is a iconic performance as Robin Hood for many. He's kind of the definitive version. For very good reason. He nails the character. He nails that sense of wonder and sense of awe. And the director, Curtis, also does this by how lavish the sets are, how saturated the frame is. I think these early these films from the 30s, the ones on this list that are in color, absolutely benefit from color. I feel like it is so lush. The Technicolor process they use is just it oversaturates the image, but in a very good way. It has warm, lush greens and vibrant, bright reds and deep blues. Like it's just, movies nowadays don't really look like that. They're darkened, and it's all about realism. It doesn't have that escapist quality that these films do. But Robin Hood is a great movie. I could watch it anytime, and I would just sit down and just get sucked into, old England and watching the sword fights and the daring escapes and the archery and all of that. It's, that's a great thing about films, is that they offer true escapism to worlds that either don't exist yet, haven't existed for centuries, or something like that. And that's what this film does in a very admirable way. My number 1, there were, so many great films I've talked about, but for me, this one takes the cake. It's directed by Frank Capra. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Oh my God, I love this movie. It's kind of a star-making role for Jimmy Stewart, and his performance is so amazing. Jean Arthur is in it as well. She's great. So is Claude Rains. He also is very stellar. But yeah, it's such a great film. It totally delivers on every level. It has such an emotional hook with the framing of Smith kind of near the end of the film, and that epic climax with the sequence where he collapses from exhaustion, and you think things have ended, but it's not over, and and justice prevails, so to speak. I mean, that's what I think I want from a film. I want a kind of movie that has such an inspirational and just amazing ending that you just want to stand up and cheer, or you want to think about that at least in your head. You want to enjoy. Just don't do it in the theater, because I don't like those people. But at home, do it. But no, it's amazing. it totally delivers on both the level of filmmaking and having innovative techniques in the way it tells the story. It's combination of darker story elements with more lighthearted stuff, I think works amazingly, but it wouldn't be possible if it doesn't make such an emotional connection with the audience, and it doesn't get them so invested in making sure the truth prevails, because you essentially have a character who is being betrayed by everyone he thought he could trust, and you want to see him prevail. You don't want to see the kind of lies and deceit win. And that's something really great about a lot of these films, is that they offer something very tangible to root for, and you understand you have a hero who's doing something great, and they're who you identify with. There's obviously merit in films with anti-heroes and that kind of thing. That's its own medium. And I think a lot of things used in these old films have become unappreciated. They're not in vogue anymore. The use of black and white, the use of 3-strip Technicolor is also not really a big thing, just kind of film in general. The use of the problem is there is, in the kind of contemporary films, in many cases, they don't exist for escapism in the sense of trying to transport someone to another world. They want to bring the other world into this one. They with Avengers and Marvel, they try to make it look as real and feel as close to real world as possible, but just add superheroes. And I think that's a mistake, because when I see a movie, I want to go somewhere else. I think all of these films do that. Even the ones set supposedly in the real world, they take you to somewhere that is totally different and totally unknown. And I think that's why I love movies. Probably that way for many other people. But yeah, a little bit aimless there at the end, but those were my top 10. I think there's many great films that I didn't even mention, because it's a very strong decade for cinema. It's a very just impressive, for me, kind of the first time where I really love these films. So yeah, thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I'll be reappearing on the main Deep Focus show pretty soon when we talk about the films of Terrence Malick. I'm very excited for that episode. But yeah, stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoyed this. Catch you on the flip side.